The air in the courtroom was charged, thick with expectation, as if all of them sensed that history was going to be made. The seats were packed, the benches creaked with the weight of neighbors, who were simply curious, watchers of the popular television show Sister Wives, and journalists who had traveled from all over the country to document every aspect of what could be the family showdown of the decade. Outside, the din was even more raucous. News trucks are parked along the street, cameras popping all night, and individuals waving signs, both for Kody Brown and his wives, who finally mustered the strength to confront him not in front of reality, television cameras, but in front of a judge. Kody Brown sat at the defendant's table, his usually assertive demeanor now rigid, near brittle, as if a man attempting to keep the pieces of a life that had escaped his grasp intact. His golden curls, once so emblematic of his rambunctious nature, were disheveled, as if even they had tired of the burden he bore. For years he was the image of an iconic American family, one husband, 4 wives, and a brood of children. Millions watched them on TV, mesmerized by the experiment of contemporary polygamy. He had reveled in the notoriety, explained his decisions, and defiantly stated that love multiplied, it didn't divide. But here, before the bright lights of the courthouse, with his family split apart, that message was shattered, parodied by those who once lived it with him. Seated across the courtroom were his wives, or rather his former wives. They had once shared meals, houses, holidays, and children together, bound in the tangled web of polygamy. Now they stood against him. Christine sat rigidly, her face set but her hands shaking on her lap. She had gone first, away from all those long years of fighting and isolation, and her presence here was both a scar and a threat. Next to her, Janelle was serene, unruffled, but her eyes gave away the flames that raged inside her. She had put not only years of her life, but also her funds into the future of this family, and now she demanded justice. Meri sat quietly, her face inscrutable. She was the first wife, the foundation of this family, the one who used to believe in the dream more than anyone else. But today she looked fragile and fierce, a woman tired of being ignored. Robyn, the final and sole remaining wife in Kody's life, sat slightly off to the side. Her chin was held high, her eyes unwavering. She was the one who had been so judged by the others, as being the favorite, shattering the delicate equilibrium of the family. Yet she had stood by Kody, and now she would stand by that choice until the end. The judge arrived and the whispers ceased. The room dropped into an uncomfortable hush. For a second, even the cameras outside stopped breathing. The case was not a criminal hearing. It was a civil suit, but the stakes were just as high. This wasn't about money or property. This was about years of love and betrayal, loyalty and abandonment, sacrifices that could never be quantified in dollars. This was about the downfall of one of the most popular families in reality TV, now bereft of lighting, producers, and editors. Here, nothing could be rehearsed. Here, all was unvarnished. The lawyers started with the introductions. The wives' representatives one by one stood up and spoke, each articulating why their clients had come. Christine sought justice for the years she claimed had been taken from her, years in which she had mothered children mostly alone, while Kody expended his energy elsewhere. Janelle sought justice for her monetary input being recognized, stating that she had invested thousands in real estate and investments, believing that it was for the family, not Kody. Meri sought validation, a symbolic justice for having been the first to stand by him, only to be cast aside when she no longer fit into his frame. And Robyn just wanted to save what she had. To her, it was not a matter of revenge, but survival. She wanted to preserve the life she created with Kody, while everyone else had abandoned ship. The crowd leaned in, riveted by the drama, watching a live episode of Sister Wives, but with no protection of editing, was akin to this. Each look, each sigh, each hushed word meant something. The suspense was stifling, and still, no one could tear their eyes away. When it was Kody's turn to testify, he stood up slowly, the chair creaking behind him with a sound that was louder than it needed to be. He was older than his years looked, frayed around the edges from his public and private wars. For an instant, his eyes scanned the courtroom, his gaze roaming over the faces of the women who once had been his partners, his friends, his family. His voice broke when he spoke. "I've loved my wives," he told us, the words spilling out like an appeal. "I've sacrificed, I've worked, I've attempted to keep something together that most people could hardly dream of. And yes, I've erred. But what they're calling for now, it's not justice, it's revenge." The words lingered in the air. Some gasped. Others shook their heads. The wives stood rigid, faces stone-like eyes, on the man who once had sworn to them eternal love and union. This wasn't vengeance to them. This was truth finally spoken aloud. The first witness was called, and the trial officially began. Christine's attorney presented evidence, records, and diary entries that told a tale of abandonment. She read passages from the journal that Christine had written during some of the worst years of her marriage. One entry talked about sitting at the dinner table, seeing Kody laugh with one of the other wives, and feeling invisible. Another talked about nights spent weeping silently, concealing the hurt from her children. While listening, tears flowed down Christine's face, but she never wavered her gaze from Kody. The court was hushed except for her soft sobbing. Journalists scribbled in their notebooks furiously, aware that this was the story they had been anticipating. Then there was Janelle. She brought bank statements, spreadsheets, and evidence of monetary offerings. She testified with the cool assurance of a woman who knew precisely what she deserved. She had poured her money into land, into property, into the future they had all been promised. And yet now, she said, she had been cut off, left with nothing to show for decades of faith in a dream. Her voice didn't tremble, but her words cut deep. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. Meri's testimony was perhaps the most haunting. She did not bring papers or charts. She brought her narrative. She presented to the court about being the first wife, about standing by Kody when no one else would, about opening her heart and home to the women who followed. She described the shame she experienced when her marriage failed, when she was no longer regarded as a partner, but as a reminder of a life Kody wished to erase. Her voice trembled, and for the first time Kody averted his gaze. He could not meet her eyes. And then finally Robyn stood. She didn't cry like the others or make accusations. She defended. "He don't like me because Kody loved me," she declared. "But love is not a sin. He's not guilty of betrayal. He's guilty of loving too much." The courtroom fell silent, murmuring. To some she sounded crazy, oblivious to the misery that surrounded her. To others she sounded true, the last one still choosing to stand by him. The judge heard attentively, but even he could not conceal the escalating skepticism in his eyes. He hunched forward once, his voice slicing through tension. "Mr. Brown, you made a choice to live in polygamy. But what I see here is not harmony. It is devastation. Why should this court find you acted in equity?" For once Kody did not have a response. He opened his mouth and then closed it again. His eyes shifted from Christine to Janelle to Meri and to Robyn. Each glance spoke of shattered trust, of years that were gone forever. His silence was more eloquent than any excuse he could have offered. The trial ran into the afternoon. Evidence was heard. Arguments were put forward. Emotion spilled out into the open. And then, finally, the judge brought down his gavel. The verdict came quickly, but it fell like a hammer blow. The assets of the family, the houses, the investments, all that they had worked for together, would be shared between all wives, no matter loyalty or circumstance. The gavel came down once more, and it was done. Christine let out a breath she'd been holding for decades. Janelle closed her eyes, relief sweeping over her. Meri sat up straighter, at last feeling heard. Robyn reached out and took Kody's hand, but he withdrew it, his eyes empty, his shoulders slumped. The man who had proudly stood as the leader of an enormous, eclectic family now seemed tiny, shattered, isolated. As the courtroom cleared, reporters hastened to write their articles. Onlookers murmured, stunned by what they had just seen. Outside, the paparazzi cameras flashed once more, memorializing the end of an era. And within, Kody Brown sat at the table, gazing at the vacant chairs where his wives had once sat, aware that the lifestyle he had battled to preserve had been lost for good, not in a television soap opera finale, but with the harsh crack of a gavel inside a courtroom. The gavel of the judge had hardly ceased its ringing when the wives' attorneys started presenting their argument. It was like an opening of a floodgate. What was initially mere rumors of infidelity soon turned into a wave of recrimination, every one of them pounding Kody Brown with the force of decades of unhealed hurt. The fellow who had once paraded before cameras as the self-satisfied head of a polygamous household sat quiet, his jaw set, his hands clasped together on the table, as his existence was picked apart in full public view. The courtroom was set for drama, but nobody had anticipated that the wives would show up so organized, so ready. While their dynamics with one another had fallen apart many years ago, on this day they stood together with one goal in mind: to get the court to comprehend what they had been through. This wasn't about land or money to them. This was about justice for all the years of silence, invisibility, and being shelved as Kody played favorites. Christine's attorney addressed the court first, her tone sharp and authoritative. She described a woman who had surrendered her youth, her health, and her fidelity to a marriage that had vowed spiritual satisfaction, but delivered desolation. Christine remained rigid, chin tilted proudly high, despite her eyes' shiny unshed tears. Her attorney explained how Christine had been single-handedly raising children, how her efforts, emotional, physical, and monetary, had been brushed off as if they meant nothing. She showed receipts of household expenses that Christine paid for herself, instances in which Kody had agreed to pay back but never did. She then revealed the first bombshell. Christine had uncovered text messages between Kody and another wife that confirmed he was intentionally splitting the family, setting one home apart from the others. The messages were read out, every one a knife in the quiet. "I don't care what Christine thinks," Kody had typed. "She'll get over it." The courtroom dissolved into whispers. Christine's attorney let the words sit for a moment before speaking. "These are not the words of an equal husband. These are the words of a manipulative man who plays on loyalty and punishes disagreement." Kody's attorney objected, but the judge left the evidence standing. Christine dropped her eyes, her shoulders shaking slightly. For the first time, Kody's faith wavered. He looked at her, maybe recalling the younger woman who had once trusted him so totally, the woman who had smiled on television during years of unhappiness. But Christine did not look back. She fixed her eyes on the judge as though to say, "This time I won't be overlooked." Then there was Janelle. Her situation was different, less emotional, more mathematical. If Christine's testimony tugged at the heart, Janelle's testimony punched squarely to the gut of the issue. Unflappable, assertive, and painstaking, she testified about investments, real estate, and the notorious piece of land the family once knew as Coyote Pass. It had been the fantasy, one big piece of property, where each wife would have a house of her own, where the family would live peacefully together. But the dream had dissolved, as had their relationships. Janelle's attorney showed him charts, bank statements, and agreements. She had invested tens of thousands of dollars in that property, hoping on Kody's dream. And years later, here she was with nothing. No home, no comeback, no acknowledgement. "He said it was for the family," Janelle explained calmly. "But ultimately it was only for him and Robyn. The rest of us were just contributing to somebody else's fantasy." The room gasped. The reporters scribbled wildly. The judge even leaned forward, his brow creased. The fact that Kody had allocated resources toward one wife while excluding the others was not only unfair, it was incriminating. Kody shifted uncomfortably, at last standing up and raising his voice. "That is not true. Coyote Pass was for everyone. They voluntarily left, not me." His words cracked in the stillness, rang too loud, too desperate. The judge banged the gavel for order, reminding him that his turn to speak would come later. Kody sat back, his face flushed, his hands trembling slightly. The man who once commanded his family's obedience now looked like someone losing control of his own story. Then it was Meri's turn. If Christine was the heart and Janelle the brain, Meri was the specter of the past. Her testimony haunted the courtroom. She was the first wife, the one who had walked into this marriage with blind faith, the one who had welcomed each new wife into their plural household with the belief that love could be shared. But her payoff had been years of abandonment, public shame, and finally rejection. Her attorney didn't require bank records or text messages. Instead, Meri herself testified. Her voice was soft but firm as she spoke of the years she remained at Kody's side, standing by his decisions even when they crushed her. She told him about observing him slide away from her, bit by bit, and being left alone in the darkness as he lavished attention on someone else. She stopped once, her eyes filled with tears. "I was first," she breathed. "But finally I was treated like I was last." The room went silent. Even the reporters who had been eagerly chasing sound bites seemed to stop and listen. Meri's pain wasn't just about money or land. It was about identity. About a life built on promises that were never kept. It was about being erased in plain sight. Before she was done, even members of the audience who had walked in with doubt were nodding, whispering, shaking their heads sympathetically. Meri descended, her face white, but her back unbroken. A woman finally telling the truth about herself after all those years of silence. And then, everyone's attention shifted to Robyn. She was the last piece of the puzzle, the wife who had stood by Kody while the others had departed. She was not there to accuse. She was there to defend. Her attorney pointed out that the story portrayed by the other wives was warped by bitterness. Robyn herself testified, her tone even but with an undercurrent of frustration. "Everything's my fault," she told me, scanning the room. "They say I was the favorite, that I stole Kody from them, but I never asked for that. I just wanted a family. I just wanted love. They view me as the bad guy, because I stayed when they left. But staying doesn't make me guilty." Her words polarized the room. Some nodded, taking her at her word. Others laughed, insisting that she was just defending herself. But regardless of what anyone thought of Robyn, her presence made one thing unmistakable. Kody wasn't merely battling his ex-wives. He was battling the idea that his decisions had unraveled the very family he had once promised to hold together. The judge eventually ordered a recess, but the harm was already done. The case against Kody wasn't only legal. It was emotional, fiscal, and spiritual. Both wives had pulled back a layer of their collective life, revealing hurts hidden for years. And as the courtroom cleared for a short recess, one thing stood painfully clear. The man who had once sat at the epicenter of a huge family empire was now backed into a corner, his reputation shattered, his power questioned, and his legacy by a thread. The courtroom had been tense with anticipation from the start. But when it came time for the wives to have their say, the air thickened. The crowd shifted forward, their gazes flicking between the two women who once shared not only a husband but a home, children, and a faith. Now, for the first time, they were not only recounting their histories to camera or confessing behind doors. Today they were speaking their truths in court, under oath, with their ex-husband seated only a few feet from them. Christine was the first to stand up. She was nervous at first, her fingers gripping the sides of the podium, but she spoke more confidently as she started talking. For years she started, keeping her gaze on the judge. "I gave everything I had to this marriage. I raised kids. I prepared meals. I stood by other wives when they were facing challenges. And I believed in the dream Kody peddled to us. But what I received in return was neglect. I became invisible." The courtroom was silent as Christine went on. She talked about nights she slept alone when Kody preferred another home, about birthdays he had missed, about the numerous times she sought love and was met with rejection. Her voice wrote a powerful picture of loneliness in a marriage that promised to be one of oneness. "I'm not here for revenge," she replied, her voice wavering. "I'm here for justice. I gave decades of my life and I was thrown away like I was nothing. I am something. My children are something. And I want the court to see that." Tears rolled down her face, but she did not stumble. She retreated from the microphone stand, leaving hanging the weight of her testimony. Kody's face was strained, his jaw grinding, but he remained silent. His eyes shifted toward her for an instant. But Christine did not glance back. Then it was Janelle's turn. She didn't cry like Christine. She strutted up to the witness stand, calm on the outside, her posture erect. If Christine was the emotional core of the wives' case, then Janelle was the backbone. Her testimony wasn't constructed around feelings. It was constructed around facts. "I invested in this family," she started sternly. "I invested in land, in homes, in companies. Every dollar I invested was because I believed in what Kody promised us, a future together. Where is that future? What happened to it?" Her attorney handed the judge a thick pile of documents. Bank statements, contracts, receipts. Janelle gestured to them as she talked, her tone firm and controlled. I wasn't merely a wife. I was an investment partner. I contributed to Coyote Pass, the house that was going to be for all of us. But now, there's nothing. No home, no profit on my investment. Just broken promises. The judge slowly nodded, thumbing through the papers. Murmurs spread around the courtroom. Reporters wrote madly, realizing that this was the type of tangible proof that could tip public perception. Kody fidgeted restlessly in his seat, leaning over to whisper something to his attorney. Janelle's tone mellowed slightly at the end. I'm not asking for more than my own. I'm simply asking for what belongs to me. I believed in him, I trusted him, and I had nothing left. That's why I'm here. She took a step back, her face unruffled but her eyes giving away a flicker of hurt. She had constructed her argument as a fortress of facts, but what lay behind was evident. She too had been shattered by the dream they had all once shared. Then it was Meri's turn. The room grew still as she approached. Her steps slow, her expression unreadable. For years, viewers of Sister Wives had watched her struggle in silence, her marriage unraveling in front of millions. Now in this courtroom, she had the chance to finally say what she had held back for so long. I was the first wife. She started gently, her voice just above a whisper. I was present when nobody else was. I was the one who trusted Kody when nobody else trusted him. I opened my home and my heart to each subsequent wife. I gave and gave and gave, and ultimately I had nothing left. Her voice cracked, but she continued. She spoke of the shame of being pushed aside, of seeing Kody's attention and affection go to others. She spoke of her devotion, of how she had held on to the marriage when it was apparent that she was no longer desired. Her words were laced with sorrow, but also with fortitude. I don't require wealth, she said at last, looking at Kody with her eyes. I require acknowledgement. I require the truth to be told. I was faithful. I was loyal. And I was discarded. That isn't right, and that's not justice. A tear slipped down her cheek, and for the first time Kody looked away. He couldn't hold her gaze. The courtroom remained silent. The audience visibly moved. Even the judge leaned back, his expression solemn. Meri's pain wasn't just about property or finances. It was about dignity. It was about reclaiming her worth. After years of being erased, each one of the wives had testified in turn, each testimony adding to the last, constructing a story of neglect, betrayal, and shattered promises. Christine had testified to the emotional cost. Janelle had presented the financial betrayal. Meri had disclosed the personal damage. Together their testimonies formed a chorus too powerful to be silenced. Meanwhile, Robyn sat quietly in her chair, hands clasped in her lap, eyes unflinching. She was well aware that her turn would eventually come, and she understood that she would be the villain. But for the moment, the courtroom was abuzz with the words of the women, once her sisters, women now opposing the man she had decided to defend. When the judge at last asked for a brief recess, the air in the courtroom was thick. Journalists scampered out to send updates, their phrases already ready to become headlines of betrayal, nepotism, and the disintegration of America's best-known polygamous clan. Kody sat still, his pale face, his hunched shoulders. The man who had once spoken of guiding his family in love and power, now resembled a man in an alleyway, deprived of the tale he had told for so long. And as the wives returned to their seats, their faces a mix of relief and fatigue, it became apparent to all in the courtroom. This was not just a trial of money or land. This was a trial of years of promises unkept. A trial of a man who had lost not just his wives, but also the legacy for which he had fought to preserve. The evidence against Kody had been exposed, and the wives had testified with strength that nobody, no one, not even Kody, could shut up. When the judge called Kody Brown to the witness stand, the room seemed to contract. The hum of whispers ceased, the rustle of papers suspended, and even the far-off clicks of cameras outside fell silent, as if the world itself strained forward to hear. Kody stood up reluctantly, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a harsh sound that made some in the audience wince. He smoothed the front of his jacket with shaking hands, but that trademark confidence, the bravado that had fueled him through years on TV, looked worn thin. He stood at the podium, his eyes sweeping the room. The gravity of the moment came crashing down upon him. There were his wives or ex-wives on the other side, faces hardened like stone. Christine with her unflappable strength, Janelle with her unshakable certainty, Meri with her hurt pride, and Robyn with her steadfast regard, the sole one who still seemed to believe in him. Seated behind them were endless rows of strangers. Reporters, neighbors, groupies who had watched their lives for more than 10 years. And now all of them were present to determine if the patriarch could defend himself, not in the public court of opinion, but in a court of law. Kody cleared his throat. His voice, when he finally spoke, was louder than one would have guessed, with an edge of rage and desperation. "Your Honor," he started, "I know what you've heard today. You've heard testimonies that make me sound like a monster, a man who left his wives behind, who dishonored his family, but I want you to hear my story. Because the truth is not so black and white." He paused, leaving his words to hang in the air. Others in the gallery moved uncomfortably. Some strained forward, wanting to hear the man they judged so harshly finally have his say. "I did love my wives," Kody asserted, his voice steady now, his shoulders bracing as if he had regained some of his former strength. "All of them. I did believe in the principle of plural marriage. I did believe that together we could create something more than ourselves. I did sacrifice for them. I did give to them. I did give them everything I could. But what they want now, it's not fairness. It's vengeance." The wives moved at his words. But no one broke in. Christine's lips pressed into a thin line. Janelle crossed her arms. Meri dropped her eyes, seeming unwilling to look him in the face. Robyn nodded slightly, however her hands locked tightly in her lap. Kody went on, his voice growing more agitated. "Yes, I did make mistakes. I'm not perfect. But who is? Did I spend more time with certain wives than others? Perhaps. Did I not balance my attention equally? Possibly. That does not make me a betrayer. That makes me fallible." His attorney presented him with a stack of papers. Kody waved them in the air, shaking them softly for emphasis. "These are the books they're referring to. They make it sound like I was stealing, like I was siphoning money into one household, and not the others. That's not what occurred. Every decision I made was done for the benefit of the family. Every penny I spent was to provide a future for all of us. If they wanted to walk away from that future, then that is not my fault." He slammed the stack down on the podium, the papers fluttering a little. The sound shocked the room. There were a few gasps that spread through the audience. The judge arched an eyebrow, but said nothing, allowing Kody to go on. Turning to Janelle, Kody's voice hardened. "You speak of Kody Pass as if it was only my dream, but you had faith in it too. You put your money into it because you knew it was for all of us. Don't rewrite history now, because you're upset." Janelle nodded her head slightly, but remained silent, her serene facial expression, a sharp contrast to Kody's increasing fervor. He faced Christine now. His voice softened, bordering on pleading. "Christine, you tell me you were invisible. But I saw you. I was there. Perhaps not as you wanted, but I did attempt it. I supported our children. I paid for the roof above your head. Was that easy? Did it feel easy to bear the burden of 4 homes? I did it because I loved you all." Christine blinked away tears, but said nothing, her face impassive. Lastly he looked at Meri. His voice rumbled lower, laced with regret. "Meri, you were my first. You stood with me when nobody else would. And I'll say it, I failed you. I let the distance build between us. But I never lost respect for you. I never lost appreciation for what you offered. If I didn't express it, that's on me. But don't stand here and tell me I threw you away. Because I never did." Meri's lips trembled, but she quickly looked away, unwilling to let him see the emotion in her eyes. Kody took a deep breath, then turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, this case isn't about money. It isn't even about property. It's about bitterness. It's about 3 women who left me and now want to punish me for it. They're upset that I decided to stay with Robyn, but I'm not guilty of anything. Love is not a crime. Deciding where to place my heart is not a crime, and I won't be judged for it." His words rang out, cutting and defiant. Some in the courtroom nodded, agreeing with his point. Others scowled, unconvinced by what they perceived as justifications. Kody's attorney came forward to strengthen his client's case, citing times when Kody had paid for hospital bills, school fees, and other expenses that had benefited all of the families. This man has borne the weight of supporting a huge family for decades, the attorney contended. He's not a thief. He's not a villain. He's a husband and a father who did the best he could with impossible circumstances. But as strong as the defense tried to sound, there was no denying the cracks. The evidence from the wives had been powerful. Christine's journals, Janelle's bank records, Meri's testimony of neglect. Against those, Kody's words felt like a mix of passion and desperation. A man fighting not just for fairness, but for the story of his life. When the defense closed, the room was abuzz once more with hushed discussion. Some felt Kody had vindicated himself, proving that he wasn't the monster his wives made him out to be. Others observed only a man who refused to accept fault, blaming everyone else but himself. The judge leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. He tapped his gavel lightly, signaling a pause. "Mr. Brown," he said finally, "you've given us much to consider. But remember, this court is not here to weigh love. It is here to weigh fairness. And fairness is not determined by passion, but by proof." Kody nodded rigidly, swallowing. For the first time the bravado faltered, and he no longer resembled the confident patriarch of old but a man aware that the ground beneath him was moving. As he sat back, Robyn reached out and took his hand. He took it this time, holding it tightly, as if she were the last tenuous hold he had. Over on the other side of the aisle, Christine, Janelle, and Meri sat silently in solidarity. The courtroom had just listened to Kody's defense, but whether anyone really believed it, well, that was still a question lingering in the air, like smoke on the wind after a fire. The atmosphere in the courtroom had become heavy, as if each person there could sense the heaviness of what was coming. The defense was just concluded, with Kody's passionate words, his voice still ringing in the ears of the audience. He had framed himself as a man misunderstood, a husband pulled too thin, a father who gave up everything. Some nodded in accordance, but most were not completely convinced. And that's when Janelle's attorney rose to his feet. He was so relaxed, so poised, almost scary in how composed he remained. His gray suit was immaculately pressed, his tie tied so neat, his every action a consideration. He took a shiny black folder from his desk and strode slowly towards the bench, each step echoing on the wood floor like a snare. The courtroom leaned in as one, as if they all sensed that something big was about to fall. "Your Honor," the attorney started, his tone silky but cutting, "what Mr. Brown has offered this court are words. Passionate, emotional, but words nonetheless. What I am going to offer are facts. Unwavering, cold facts." He set the folder on the judge's desk with a gentle thud. The noise was louder than it needed to be, cutting across the quiet like a blade. He opened it gingerly and exposed a sheaf of documents. These he held up the initial few pages. "Our bank statements and accounting records covering the past 5 years of Mr. Brown's handling of the family's shared accounts." Kody bristled at the defendant's table. His attorney squirmed in his seat. Robyn's hand was on Kody's arm, but his eyes were fixed on the documents, his jaw clenching. The attorney went on. "Years went by, and these wives left their money, their investments, their savings in the hands of Mr. Brown, with the understanding that he was allocating resources fairly to all households. What these documents reveal paints a considerably different picture. However," he turned to the audience now, holding the papers aloft like exhibits in a blockbuster crime series. Tens of thousands of dollars were moved quietly from the joint accounts into an account owned solely by Mr. Brown. And where did that go? To buy things and acquisitions that benefited solely one wife, Robyn Brown. Gasps filled the courtroom. Christine covered her mouth with her hands. Meri's eyes widened in shock. Janelle, though she already knew, still closed her eyes for a moment, as though reliving the betrayal all over again. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notepads, their pens scratching like the buzzing of bees. The attorney thumbed through the pages, reading off line items with accuracy. $25,000 withdrawal, coinciding with down payment on a house, deeded only to Robyn Brown. $12,000 in furniture and renovations, receipts attached to the same address. Several luxury items, including jewelry and designer clothing, all charged to this account, and all sent to Robyn's home. The judge's eyebrows went up, and he leaned forward to examine the documents more intently. "Are these authenticated?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor," answered the lawyer confidently. "These records were subpoenaed straight from the banks. They are not allegations. They are fact." Kody finally outburst, hitting the table with his hand. "That's not stealing. That's not hidden spending. That was for the future of our family." His voice broke with urgency. "That house was meant to be the foundation of all this. A home base for all of us. A place where we could all go. Don't take this and make it something dirty." The attorney didn't blink. He just laid another page on the judge's bench. "If that was the case, Mr. Brown, then why is the deed only in Robyn Brown's name? Why were none of the other wives privy to this house, or even aware it had been purchased? If it was for the family, why was the family left out of the documents?" The room hummed more loudly now, whispers echoing off the walls. The atmosphere was more than tense. Some in the gallery shook their heads in amazement. Others gazed at Kody as if they were seeing him for the first time. Christine leaned forward slightly in her seat, her voice shaking. "So all those late nights questioning why there wasn't enough money for our kids to do their activities, to go on school trips, to get the things they needed, it was because of this? Because he was creating a new life somewhere else?" Her voice cracked, laced with pain and anger. "Order," the judge thundered, banging his gavel. The noise brought Christine back into her seat, though she continued to cry silently down her face. Janelle leaned forward at this point, addressing the judge directly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes blazed with inner fire. "Your Honor, I put my own money into Coyote Pass. I believed in that vision, as did the others. But while I was investing money into land that remains still undeveloped, Kody was quietly diverting family assets into a life that served him and Robyn alone. That is not leadership. That is not justice. That is betrayal." Kody's face reddened, his chest rising and falling. "No, that's not betrayal. That's strategy. I was attempting to create something solid, something lasting. You don't realize the pressure that was on me, keeping 4 homes going, paying all the bills. You all assume that I played favorites, but the reality is I made survival decisions." "Survival for who?" Janelle retorted, her placid mask at last cracking. "For all of us, or for you and Robyn?" The question hung there, cold and cruel. Kody had no response. His lips parted, but no sound escaped. He sat down hard, covering his face with his hands for a moment before looking up again. Defiant but perceptibly shaken. The attorney wasn't finished. He produced photos now, photos of the house in question. A palatial 2-story home with manicured lawns, luxury cars parked in the driveway, and newly painted walls. It bore no resemblance to half-finished dreams of Coyote Pass. No resemblance to sacrifices the other wives had made. "These are the fruits of Mr. Brown's so-called strategy," the attorney spat. "While the other wives waited for their promised houses, while they cinched belts and made sacrifices, this is what was constructed behind their backs." The judge examined the photographs for a considerable amount of time, and then he turned his gaze upon Kody. His tone was even but resolute. "Mr. Brown, how do you justify this? How do you call this fair?" Kody stood tall, his tone low but shaking with repressed rage. "Because I was hoping in Robyn. I was hoping she was the one to keep this family together. The rest were floating away, questioning, on the verge of leaving. If I invested in them, what assurance was there that they'd even remain? But Robyn, she was faithful. She was dedicated. I had to provide a future through her, or it would have all collapsed." The courtroom was silent. The wives looked at each other, anger, incredulity, and vindication playing across their faces. For years they had suspected preferential treatment, and now, Kody had confirmed it, out loud, in the presence of the judge, in front of the world. The silence was broken when the judge rapped his gavel again. "This court has heard enough for today. We will recess and resume tomorrow morning." The gavel rang out with a gunshot sound, announcing the session's end. But the hurt was inflicted. The bombshell had been delivered, and the room reeled from the shock. Kody sat crumpled in his chair, smaller than anyone had ever seen him, as Robyn shouted angrily into his ear, attempting to soothe him. Across the way, Christine, Janelle, and Meri sat together, bound by both anger and vindication. And out in the courtroom building, the world waited for the headlines. Because everyone knew, the trial of Kody Brown had just become something so much larger than anyone had ever dreamed. The court had hardly shaken off the financial shock when the second wave started to swell. Everyone was still talking about the house, the hidden account, the overt favoritism that Kody had confirmed. Some couldn't get it out of their heads. Others weren't shocked at all. But before the air was fully charged with the reverberations of Janelle's testimony, Christine's attorney silently stood up. Unlike Janelle's attorney, who had moved like a bolt of lightning, Christine's attorney glided like a ghost, slow, measured, allowing the silence to create expectation before he began to speak. He pushed his glasses up onto his nose, coughed softly, and spoke in an unhurried voice that still carried across the room. Your Honor, the evidence financially is strong, but money isn't currency in a marriage. There is another type of account, one of words, emotion, and experience, that speaks louder than any bank statement ever could. Today we present Christine Brown's intimate journals, entered throughout the years of her marriage to Mr. Brown. Suddenly the room erupted in gasps and whispers. Reporters nodded forward so far their pens were on the verge of snapping on their pads. Gallery fans covered their mouths, their eyes wide, and at the defense table, Kody's head snapped up, his eyes flashing alarm. Journals? He growled. Private thoughts, those are not evidence. They're her emotional ramblings. The judge held up a hand to shut him down. Mr. Brown, you will get an opportunity to react. Go on, he told Christine's attorney. The attorney nodded and produced a thick, leather-bound binder. Pinned inside were photocopies of handwritten pages. Christine's words, her voice recorded over decades of turmoil and silence. The attorney gazed at her tenderly. Mrs. Brown, would you like to speak on your own behalf? Christine stood. She stood very slowly. Her hands shook a little as she moved towards the witness stand. She wasn't dressed in bright colors or designer suits, just plain blouse and skirt. Her blonde hair pulled back from her face empty of anything but truth. When she took the seat, the silence in the courtroom was so absolute, you could hear the sound of the clock on the wall ticking. She breathed deeply and gazed down at the binder. I never imagined anyone would ever read these, she said softly, her tone calm, but with a heavy gravitas. These were my sanctuary, my reality when nobody else wanted to believe it. But if I don't put them out there now, then my tale isn't ever heard. Her lawyer gave her the first page. Christine trembled as she read. Her voice quivered but increased with each sentence. October 12, 2015. Tonight Kody sat at the table, laughing with Robyn. He did not even glance my way. I talked twice, but he didn't listen. It was like I wasn't there. I sometimes wonder if I am to him anymore. The kids notice. They want to know why Dad spends more time with Robyn's children than with us. I don't know what to say. I just say he loves us all. But I don't think it anymore. The words clung in the air. A murmur ran around the audience, some brushing away tears, others shaking their heads. Christine gritted hard and moved on to another entry. March 3, 2017. He said he would attend Isabel's school play. She searched for him amidst the throng, but he never showed up. She wept that evening and asked me why her daddy didn't love her very much. I hugged her, but in my heart I was shattering. He was at Robyn's once more, always at Robyn's. At the defense table, Kody shifted restlessly, his fists balled. This is exaggeration, he exclaimed, his voice rising. I was busy, I was Mr. Brown, the judge warned, his gavel knocking once. You will wait your turn, Christine went on, her voice shaking but firm. July 22, 2019. Tonight, I pleaded with him to speak to me. I wanted to know if he still loved me, if I still existed to him. He said he didn't know. He didn't know. After 25 years, after 6 kids, after all of this, we are left to, I don't know. I sobbed myself to sleep. He didn't even notice. At this point, most of the people in the gallery were openly weeping. Even Meri wiped her eyes, her own background of isolation reflected in Christine's words. Janelle's jaw was clenched, but her eyes welled up with tears she wouldn't let fall. Christine closed the binder for a second, finding her strength. Then she addressed the judge. Your Honor, I spent years feeling like a ghost in my own marriage. I gave him all of that. My youth, my love, my loyalty. But he returned nothing. I didn't ask for money, or property, or even attention constantly. I only asked to be seen, to be loved on the same level as everyone else. And instead, I was ignored, year after year, as he constructed a life elsewhere. The room was still, utterly still. Even the journalists had ceased their writing, captivated by the unvarnished truth pouring into the courtroom. Christine's attorney put another sheet down in front of her. One final entry, he whispered. Her voice broke reading it. November 10th, 2020. I believe this was the day I fell out of love with him. I understood that regardless of what I do, no matter how hard I am, he will never choose me. He will always choose her. And I can no longer teach my children that this is what love is. So I will smile for them, but within I am gone. A gasp passed through the room. Christine laid the paper down, tears streaming down her face. She dried them hastily, but didn't pretend. She sat there, exposed and vulnerable. Her secret at last. Out, the judge leaned forward, his expression somber. Mrs. Brown, he said softly, thank you for your bravery. These journals are not financial records, perhaps, but they are a record. Yes, a record of lived life, of emotional abandonment. This court cannot turn a blind eye to that. Kody leapt to his feet, his voice echoing. This isn't fair. You're making me out to be a monster on one-sided emotions. You don't know what it's like to work with this size of family, to work all the responsibilities. Sure, mistakes were made, but this doesn't make me not love her. It doesn't make me not be there. But his words were empty. The court had already heard Christine's truth, penned in her own handwriting, spoken in her own words, and no amount of yelling could make it go away. Christine glared at him once more, her eyes firm. For years she had been an invisible, but today she was unstoppable. The judge banged his gavel a third time. We will recess. Court is adjourned for the day. As the room erupted into whispers, Christine strode back to her seat, shoulders squared. Janelle grasped her hand and squeezed it. Meri nodded once, her eyes welling up with tears. Even strangers in the audience stood, clapping gently, until the bailiff commanded silence. And across the aisle, Kody remained immobile, his face flushed, his eyes bulging. For the first time in the trial, he resembled a man who understood the tide had shifted, and it may never shift back. The courtroom doors creaked as individuals walked back in following the recess. Outdoors, journalists yelled headlines into the microphones. Christine's journals shake courtroom. Kody Brown exposed by his own wives. And fans pushed up against the barricades to see the face of the man whose family soap opera had become a courtroom battle. Within, the atmosphere was different. Thicker, almost charged. The audience settled back into their seats, still talking in hushed tones about the journals. Even those who had been sympathetic to Kody now were not so sure. It was one thing to deny partiality, but Christine's words, so unvarnished and direct, were difficult to dismiss. And yet, as the bailiff brought the court back into session, there was one card left for the defense to play. Robyn Brown. She was the remaining wife who remained faithful to him, the one Kody himself had called his soulmate, albeit never applied that term to the others. She was also in large part the most incendiary player in the whole drama. She was blamed by the fans for the demise of the family, envied by the wives for her perceived favoritism, and even in the courtroom today, eyes were turned upon her with suspicion. The defense attorney rose. Your Honor, now we would like to have Robyn Brown testify. The room came alive in an instant, muttering waves rising like rocks against the beach. Some laughed outright, others leaned forward with anticipation. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The woman at the eye of the storm was finally going to have her say. Robyn rose slowly, adjusting her dark skirt, her face pale but resolute. She moved quietly to the witness stand, putting one hand on the Bible, the other raised and taking the oath. As she sat down, she cast a brief glance toward Kody. He nodded to her infinitesimally, grasping at her presence, like a man drowning clutching at a lifeline. The defense attorney smiled kindly. Mrs. Brown, thanks for being here. You've heard the testimonies. You've heard what the other wives have testified to. Tell us, in your own words, What is the truth about Kody Brown? Robyn breathed deeply, her tone gentle but firm. The truth, she said, is that Kody is not the monster he's being made out to be. He is not a thief, he is not a liar, and he is not a man who does not love his family. What he is human. And what he has been guilty of, is loving too much. A murmur of derisive snickers and whispers passed through the crowd. Christine's head shook in dismay. Janelle's eyebrow shot up in incredulity. Even Meri gave a scornful laugh behind her hand. But Robyn forged on, unmoved. When I married Kody, she went on, her voice shaking a little, I knew what I was getting myself into. A household of 3 already married, kids in every room, duties piled higher than anyone could possibly manage. I knew it wouldn't be simple. But what I didn't know was how much he would strain to carry all of us. How much he would strain himself attempting to make everyone content. He's been stretched, pulled in every direction, and no matter what he did, it wasn't enough. Not because he didn't try, but because no human being could do it flawlessly. Her attorney nodded in encouragement. And how about this charge of favoritism? That he spent more time, more money, more of himself with you than with the other wives. Robyn folded her hands in her lap. Yes, he spent more time with me. I refused to lie. But not because he didn't love them. Because they'd already lost interest. Christine pulled away a long time before she ended it. Janelle stood back, selecting her freedom over nearness. Meri, she hesitated, looking towards Meri, the mask of her face as hard as stone. Meri shut her heart off years ago. I was the only person who remained open, the only one who still wished to construct a marriage. So yes, he turned to me more. Because I was there. I wanted him. I wanted us. The courtroom hummed louder now, half the crowd gasping in shock, the other half muttering angrily. Christine's jaw set, her eyes burning. Janelle shook her head, disgust all over her face. Meri sat rigid, her eyes shining, but she would not meet Robyn's gaze. The lawyer prompted her on. And the money, the house, the accounts? Robyn set her shoulders, her voice stronger now. That house wasn't for me alone. It was for all of us. Kody wanted something that would be a meeting place, a home base where all of us could feel secure. But the others didn't want it. They felt it as favoritism, him picking me. But it wasn't. I invited all of them into my home, every one of them. I pleaded with them to come, to be with us. They said no. They decided on separation. And now they wish to term it betrayal. The lawyer allowed the words to float in the air, then moved back. No further questions. The judge turned to the plaintiff's table. Do the wives wish to cross-examine? Christine leaped to her feet. Yes, Your Honor. Her attorney attempted to soothe her, but she brushed him aside and strode right up to the witness stand. Her cheeks reddened by indignation. Robyn, do you truly think you said what you just testified? That we drew back? That we elected to be apart? Or did you ever pause to consider that perhaps we drew back because he wasn't there? Because he gave it all to you and left leftovers for the rest of us? Robyn's eyes flashed with hurt, but she stood firm. I did not steal him from you. You lost him. You quit fighting for him. Christine's voice broke, rough with years of unspoken emotion. No, Robyn, we quit because the fight was already lost. He chose you, and he never looked back. The gallery burst into whispers once more. The air thick with tension, the judge rapped his gavel on the desk. Order! Order! Christine sat down again, shaking while Robyn sat upright, though her hands quivered slightly in her lap. Kody stood up at last, unable to contain himself. This is what I've been telling you, he bellowed. They gave up on me, they dumped me, and now they want to turn me into the bad guy for falling in love with the one woman who still wanted me. Mr. Brown, the judge boomed, his gavel crashing against the wood. You will sit down and compose yourself, or I will have you ejected. Kody fell back into his seat, fuming, his face beat red with anger. The judge returned to Robyn. You may step down. Robyn rose to her feet, her knees trembling, but her jaw set. She made her way back to the seat next to Kody, who held her hand rigidly, his knuckles white. She was his final protector, his final supporter, and although what she'd said was fierce, it was plain to all in the room, she'd only widened the gap. Because by standing up for him, she had confirmed what all the other wives had asserted all along, that he had picked her. And in that, he had lost the rest. Undefined. The judge glanced down at his notes. His expression unreadable. But the onlookers, the lawyers, even the journalists in the gallery knew. The tide turned against Kody now. The courtroom had become restless. Following Robyn's testimony, the audience murmured to each other, giving knowing glances, their heads shaking or scribbling in notebooks. Journalists were all but foaming at the mouth, already writing tomorrow's headlines. Robyn stands up for Kody, but at what cost? The wives sat along a line, their feelings raw and exposed. Christine's face was still flushed from her outburst, her tightly clenched fists buried in her lap. Janelle was serene on the exterior, but her eyes spoke otherwise. Icy rage, honed over years of sacrifice. Meri, while quiet, appeared hurt, as if each sentence uttered from that podium had torn open old wounds. And Robyn sat beside Kody, her hand in his, lips set in determination, though her eyes gave away the quiver of fear. But they did not know what the judge was going to do. The gavel cracked against the wood. Bang! The room was quieted at once. The judge, a severe man with steel-gray hair and a face that revealed nothing, leaned forward on the bench. His hands were clasped, and he stared straight at Kody Brown. His look was keen, slicing, the sort of look that caused even the toughest men to flinch. "Mr. Brown," he said, his tone calm but tinged with gravity. "This court has sat patiently. We have heard from your wives. We have considered the financial records. We have been moved by personal affidavit, including Mrs. Christine Brown's diaries. And we have heard Mrs. Robyn Brown's plea on your behalf. But at the heart of all this commotion is a simple question, one that you, and you alone, must answer." The air was held breathless in the room. Kody sat rigid in his seat, his skin pale but resolute. The judge leaned in closer, his tone lowering slightly, as if addressing Kody directly within his soul. "You committed yourself to a polygamous life. You committed yourself to assuming not one, but 4 wives. You committed yourself to forging a family across households, across states, across generations. And yet, what I see standing before me is not a united family, but a broken one. I ask you now, why should this court believe that you behaved in fairness? Why should this court believe that you discharged the duties you freely assumed upon yourself?" The words struck like a hammer, beating into Kody's chest. He stood up slowly, his stiff legs, his shaking hands that clung to the podium's edge. His golden curls, once a badge of pride, hung limp now, as if even they bore the burden of the question. He glanced about the courtroom, at Janelle, at Meri, at Robyn, and lastly at the crowd of strangers, who waited to hear him speak. For once he did not have a speech prepared. No passionate defense, just nothing. The judge's eyes lidded. "Well, Mr. Brown, this is your chance. Persuade us." Kody's mouth opened, but nothing was released. His throat convulsed, but nothing came out. He cleared it, coughed, then at last pushed out. "Because I tried." The words were little, too little for the room's size. The judge did not blink. "Explain." Kody's voice broke as he spoke more forcefully. I did love them. All of them. I did try to provide, to balance, to lead. I gave years of my life, my health, my vitality. I gave everything I had, and it wasn't enough." His voice was anguished now. "They speak of fairness, but what is fairness when one man is stretched 4 ways? When, however you do whatever you do, someone gets overlooked? Ask me, Your Honor. How is any man able to do that?" The courtroom hummed with murmurs once again. Some nodded. He had made a valid point. Others shook their heads. An excuse? No more. Christine stood up suddenly, her restraint lost. "You don't get to say you tried, Kody. Trying isn't just showing up. Trying is being here. Trying is being present for birthdays, for graduations, for moments when your kids needed you. You weren't there. You weren't trying. You were choosing." "Order!" the judge shouted. But the harm was done. The passion in Christine's voice hung in the air like a storm cloud. Janelle then spoke, her serene voice slicing through the din like a knife. "Fairness isn't not possible, Kody. Fairness is work. Fairness is dialogue. You didn't lose because you had too much to balance. You lost because you quit balancing altogether. You dropped us. And then you referred to it as trying." Meri's voice came after, softer but no less condemning. I would have stayed, Kody. I would have fought for us. But you looked at me and said there was nothing left. You quit loving me. That's not trying. That's quitting. The words of the wives cut like arrows, penetrating the final shreds of Kody's defense. He stood there, mouth agape. But words failed to come. The fire in his speeches that once used to burn was extinguished. The judge allowed the silence to build, long and crushing, before he spoke again. Mr. Brown, you are not only before this court as a husband, but as the head of a family you volunteered to build. Leadership requires responsibility. Justice requires consistency. Love requires sacrifice. This court does not care whether you were overwhelmed. It cares whether you fulfilled the obligations you took. And based upon what I heard, I am not persuaded. The words hit him like a punch. Kody slumped, his posturing deflating. Robyn's grip on his hand was tight, mouthing something in his ear. But even her devotion could not protect him from the judge's scrutiny. The judge settled back, his tone definitive. I will examine all evidence carefully before I give my verdict. But this I will tell you, Mr. Brown, silence is more eloquent than excuses. And today, when I ask you the simplest question, why should we believe you played fairly? You couldn't answer. The gavel hit once, thunderously. The hearing was at an end. Kody sank into his chair, his complexion pale. He glanced about the room, but wives were not looking at him now. Christine sat stiffly with her jaw set, looking straight ahead. Janelle wrote neat notes with steady precision. Meri wiped away tears with a tissue, her expression unyielding. And Robyn, the last of them remaining by his side, appeared terrified, as if she too sensed what was to follow. Outside, the cameras remained patiently, starved of sound bites. Inside, the audience processed out in mute shock. They had just seen the moment when Kody Brown, once the brash patriarch of 4 wives, once the subject of a popular TV show, once the man who appeared unassailable, had been laid bare by the most basic of queries. And although the decision had not yet been uttered, everyone in that room recognized the momentum had shifted, and it wasn't his. The courtroom was quiet, too quiet. The judge had retired to deliberate, and in his absence, the air felt thick, almost claustrophobic. Even the hum of fluorescent lights above sounded louder than it typically did. Spectators were whispering in soft voices, but no one was brave enough to talk above a whisper. Everyone was aware that history was going to be created. Kody Brown sat rigidly at the defense table, his fingers drumming anxiously on the smooth wood. Robyn gripped his arm, her face white but firm. She muttered prayers under her breath, her lips barely perceptible. Behind her, Christine, Janelle and Meri sat in tandem, an awkward cohesion uniting them once again. Not as co-wives, not as competition, but as women standing against the man who had destroyed them. Minutes seemed like hours. The world beyond was running out of time. Groups surged at the barricades. Journalists struggled with their cameras, anticipating the breaking news shot that would make headlines for weeks. The sister wives' verdict. The phrase was already trending. Then finally the side door creaked open. The bailiff entered, his expression serious. "All rise," he declared. Each face in that courtroom stood tall as the judge entered, his robe flowing behind him like a shadow. He had a pile of papers, but his gaze revealed nothing. He mounted the bench, pushed up his glasses, and scanned the sea of faces. And then, with a sharp rap of his gavel, he addressed them. "You may be seated." The creak of chairs on the floor resounded with thunderous echoes. Hearts beat rapidly. Even the spectacle seekers were now inclined forward, feeling the seriousness of what was to follow. The judge started slowly, his voice even, measured. "This court has heard the testimony of all concerned. We have heard charges of favoritism, monetary malfeasance, and emotional abandonment. We have examined physical evidence, such as financial records and personal correspondence, and we have considered the credibility of every witness, including Mr. Brown himself." Kody swallowed with effort, his fists unclenched on the table. The judge went on. "It is not the responsibility of this court to quantify love, or to decide the success or failure of a plural marriage, but it is the responsibility of this court to decide if Mr. Brown complied with the responsibilities he took upon himself. Responsibilities to fairness, honesty and accountability in the relationships he entered voluntarily. Christine leaned forward, her own breath stuck in her throat. Janelle's eyes were narrowed in concentration, her attorney's pen held suspended over paper, though he had ceased taking notes. Meri shredded a tissue in her hands, until it almost ripped. The judge shifted his glasses for the third time, his face stern. Considering the evidence brought before this court concludes that Mr. Brown exhibited a clear pattern of one-spouse preference, Mrs. Robyn Brown, at the cost of his duties to the others. Financial records verify unequal resource distribution. Testimonies verify abandonment of emotional duties. This court thus concludes. The silence was agonizing. Journalists took a breath. The crowd in the room leaned forward. That Mr. Brown has failed to fulfill the obligations inherent in his plural marriage. The room came in gasps. Christine's hand clamped over her mouth. Janelle nodded, tears rolling down her cheek. Meri let out a silent sigh, letting go of years of anguish. Robyn held Kody's hand more tightly, whispering, "It's not over, it's not over." But Kody's face had fallen slack, color draining as if the earth had opened under him. The judge swept his gavel up to quiet the commotion. Bang! Order! I will have order in this court. The grumbling ceased, although the tension remained alive like static electricity. The judge went on, his voice unyielding. As for legal remedies, this court now directs that all marital duties except those legally ratified be dissolved. Custody and financial arrangements shall be realigned fairly to accommodate this directive. In addition, Mr. Brown shall surrender sole authority of family financial accounts. A third party impartial will preside over the distribution of assets in order to maintain fairness. Newsmen wrote madly. Out in the street, the news wave had just broken. Judge ends Brown marriages. Kody loses control of family property. Kody leaped to his feet, shouting with urgency. "You can't do this. You don't get it. This family was my calling, my mission. I gave my life for it. You can't take it from me." The gavel slammed down once again. Bang! Bang! "Mr. Brown, you sit down or you will be ejected from this courtroom." Kody's chest expanded with ragged breathing, his eyes wild. He spun to Robyn. Tell them it's not true. Tell them I gave everything." Robyn's lips shook, but she was silent. Her silence was more vocal than any shriek. Christine stood, trembling but steadfast. "No, Kody, we did everything. You just didn't notice it." The gallery hummed once more, feeling coursing like a wildfire through the room. The judge struck his gavel until there was silence again. "This court's decision is final," he stated. "Mr. Brown, you are released from your duties as head of this plural family. The law cannot command love, but can mandate equality, and you have come up short on that score." The gavel came down once again. Bang! The verdict was rendered. Chaos broke out at once. Reporters charged out of the exits to get their stories in first. Fans cheered or yelled in indignation outside. Flash bulbs lit up as Christine, Janelle, and Meri exited in unison.